Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to my channel where we talk about motherhood, wellness, and spirituality. And today I'm giving a lot of information about women's health in regards to really just. What? Cece, I'm recording. I'm working.
I said shoot.
Yeah, but I'm talking. And this video was actually inspired by one of my recent blog posts, which I'll link in the description box for you to reference. And that's where I broke down the different archetypes, main archetypes, because there are so many archetypes of the feminine aspect of humans. So biologically, you can categorize this as, for maiden, this would be looked at as your teen years into your early 20s, and then the mother aspect being from your mid 20s to your mid 30s, and then the crone archetype really just 40 and onwards. Now, of course, these are just generalized ranges because we all don't develop at the same rate. That would be very boring. So so it fluctuates, of course, from person to person. Let's go ahead and talk about now. In each of these categories, we're going to talk about a few different things. So for those three archetypes, we're going to go over biological development, social development, and spiritual development. A holistic approach into what's needed for a woman at that stage. And then for each of those, the biological, social, and spiritual, I'll suggest an herbal ally, a few of them, one or a few, depending, to help support those stages. So for the maiden aspect, there's a lot that is erupting and evolving in such a short amount of time for a woman at this stage of her life. This is when she's just getting used to her period and her menses cycle, which fluctuates on its own. It takes some time after a while, after it starts, for it to balance itself out. Now, that time, of course, depends on things that the woman is experiencing at that time. So if it's just a disappearance, which is called amenorrhea, if I'm saying that correctly, which is like a lack of your menses, or you could be on the other side of the spectrum, just really heavy onset of your period. And so it all depends on what's going on, what those underlying factors are to cause your flow to be the way it is when it's establishing. That's another conversation for another day. So yeah, there's a lot going on within the body. And of course, socially, you're just starting to notice the attention that you get in society as a woman. Of course, you're at the end stage of developing, in that awkward phase of layering your bras or not wearing bras. You know how it is. And so, you start to get noticed. There's a lot of self-awareness going on at that time, or a lack thereof. And then, as that progresses, into your 20s, you begin to experience different social interactions. And this all depends on how you grew up in your home, whether or not you were, had time constraints, or you could go out and do whatever. It all depends. And so that really affects your social interactions as a young adult. And then, of course, spiritually, it all depends too on your background, I think. So, or your upbringing. This is a time where people tend to, I guess, rebel, as people like to put it. I personally, like to call it the exploration phase. You're really starting to gain a sense of your place in the world and what it means to be here, as a human being, as a spiritual being. And so those are big questions to tackle. And of course, your social interactions are going to influence your spiritual development heavily, which is why I always encourage young people to be mindful about who they are surrounding themselves with. And so, it's a very unraveling time in a woman's life. And so, generally speaking, so for the biological aspect, red raspberry leaf, no, that's very general. However, it does offer a lot for a woman, especially, you know, for that balancing aspect. So red raspberry leaf is a very nourishing and tonifying herb. So it helps with establishing healthy uterine tissues from the get-go, which is awesome, especially if you do have a history of women's health issues within your family. This is important for you to keep a mental note of. And so red raspberry leaf is really nice to have on hand. It also helps with establishing, like I mentioned, the balance of your hormones at that time. You know, as the progesterone fluctuates, your estrogen fluctuates during the time of the month, and ovulation, you know, all those fluctuations that go on. Red raspberry leaf can offer some balance during that time. And then, of course, another thing too is one of the plants, there was a study where they were studying the antioxidant levels of plants, and red raspberry leaf is actually one of the top 10, I believe, plants to have, I believe it's flavonoids. I'm trying to think of what antioxidant it is. Flavonoids, polyphenols, I'm not too sure. Because if you look at the leaf, it has like a little red tint on it, and that's where the power lies. Of course, it's in the berries too. Enjoy the berries, they're delicious. I know our kids love them. And so, yeah, so that's for red raspberry leaf. Socially, honestly, this all depends, you know, because anxiety, there's a lot of mental dis-ease within young people. And so, especially now in the modern day, it's just on an upgoing scale, and it's very sad to see. But I wouldn't say it's very sad because, you know, in the midst of unfortunate, I wouldn't say unfortunate circumstances, but just like when people are suffering, I feel like that opens an avenue for us to find different ways of helping people. But anyways, so yeah, mentally, it all depends, you know, that attributes to your social interactions. And so I would suggest a nervine, and it all depends. I would suggest a calming nervine. Lemon balm is really, really nice. It's not too strong like hops per se or passion flower, and it doesn't give you bad dreams like I know valerian does for some people. And so yeah, it's a very gentle medicine. So I would suggest lemon balm. I'm trying to think of other ones. Adaptogens would be a nice one to incorporate too for the social aspect, even for the spiritual aspect of development as well. Now, in addition to the nervines, excuse me, root medicine is also really nice during, you know, as you're establishing your social life, because it keeps you grounded, right? You know, this is a time, like I mentioned, where people get pulled in so many different directions and are influenced by people. Hold on, the little one is up. All right, yeah, so as I was saying, root medicine, I believe, will definitely support someone in their social life during this stage in their womanhood. Sorry, I'm making noise. It's just a button. It's a finger. It keeps me entertained mentally, I guess, while I'm talking to you guys. But anyways, okay, so spiritually. So yes, spiritually, honestly, rose. I know it sounds very generic, and it might seem soft and a little bit too feminine, but it really isn't. Like rose medicine is very how can I say, it meets you where you're at. I mean, granted, you know, all plant medicines do this, but rose has a way of offering you what you need, and sometimes it's even something that you don't even know that you needed, you know, in regards to your healing. Cecilia, please be quiet. Thank you. We can echo later. Thank you. But yeah, rose medicine. And you can utilize this. You don't even have to ingest it. And that's the thing. I talked about this in a previous video about plant dietas. So with rose medicine in particular, especially pertaining to your spiritual development, you could do like a meditation with it, sit with it, get acquainted with it. You can grow it. That's another way to do it. And then, of course, medicine making aspects, you know, making glycerites, rose waters. I might do that today, actually, because we have a lot of rose. Water. Yeah, girl, we might make some rose water later. Okay. And then on a plant alchemy level, on an esoteric level, it vibrates on such a high energy, you know, being pink in color. You know, that color is so how do I say, downgraded or bastardized even, um, which is what they do with things that are very sacred. However, things are changing around. It's okay. It's okay. So yeah, pink is one of those colors, and yeah, it's very high. Just me talking about it, I'm just tingling. And so even with meditation, you can just sit with it if you need some healing. This is also very nice, you know, if spiritually you need to do some past trauma healing. Rose medicine does offer that for you. All right, let's go on to the Mother Archetype. Now, biologically, you're just developing more. You're embodying, and you're developing more physically, you know, in all aspects, but physically you definitely are. And then the difference here is there's much more embodiment here, you know, much more self-love, self-awareness for yourself during this aspect of your life. And so, and remember, I said, you know, it depends. You know, generally, this archetype starts within like your mid 20s into your mid 30s, but it could start as earlier or later depending on where you're at in your life. So it all depends. And so, yeah, it's a very it's a wonderful time. And so biologically wise, and I'll talk about the spiritual and even sexual aspects of how you can delve into plant alchemy in that way. And then of course socially, this is really where you are starting to create and be an active participant in this realm, which is really exciting. And so you know, your throat chakra is activated and going, your brain, you are connected, especially, you know, heart center with your mind. It's powerful. And so being conscious of that and using it wisely, you can create a lot through your actions, through your thoughts, physically, with sex, you know, creating these amazing human beings like the one behind me here. What are you doing?
Huh?
Can you go eat, please?
Okay.
Yeah, you need to get full so we can go outside. Go.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm almost done. Okay, go sit down. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Oh man. But yeah, there's just a lot of creative energy here. And like I mentioned, the throat chakra is very stimulated. Or it could be on the other side of the spectrum. It just depends on where you're at. And you know, having that awareness, it's not a bad thing. You know, when I'm talking about spectrums of things, I'm just giving examples. For, you know, because different people watch this, you know, not everyone's in the same place. And so to give different options of, or talk about where people are on the spectrum, and then delving into what could help them, is more helpful to me anyway. And so and I hope it is for you as well. Let me know in the comments. So plant allies to support your body during this time are really rich in their volatile oils, and these also tend to be Gemini herbs, you know, which Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Like I mentioned, there's that mind and heart connection, and your throat is just sitting right there in the middle, and so it's just activated. And so yeah, herbs and plants like lemongrass, geranium, lavender, bergamot, which are all wonderful plants that you can grow as well. Yeah, so like I was saying, these rich volatile herbs and plants you can incorporate in different ways to enhance your social well-being. Of course, this will trickle into your spiritual well-being as well. And during this time, it's the same as the Maiden Aspect. It's just a continual process, you know, going through and looking at your traumas, analyzing them. I was gonna say shedding them, you know, depending on what traumas you're releasing. I guess releasing is a better word. So there's that aspect. It's just continual healing. It's a continual journey, and you're really starting to even get acquainted with your spiritual powers, which everyone has. And so developing that, is a pivotal point of the motherhood aspect, because you're going to use those spiritual powers that you have in the creation process. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, you're being more present in your space for yourself and for others. And so by establishing that, it just you don't even have to establish it, just acknowledging it goes a long way. And so that's honestly just the beginning of the whole journey, is the acknowledgement of those spiritual powers. And so yeah, and I would also recommend too, on the medical astrology aspect of this, to look at where the Chiron, it's a planet, comet, planetary object, whatever you want to call it, it still influences us regardless. So it's known for being the wounded healer, which I still need to do that video, you guys, you know, expounding on Chiron. And so, but you can, there's a way that you can look at it in your chart, and it'll reveal to you aspects of yourself that you need to heal, so you can teach others. That's essentially what the Chiron is there for. And so doing that during this time would be very beneficial. Honestly, it'll give you a leg up, because it's that healing that it'll reveal to you during that time at such a young age, where people will be struggling with later on in their life, when they need to be enjoying their life. They're still processing things. So you can get a jump start on that, looking at Chiron. So if you need help with that, I do medical astrology readings as well. And so so herbal allies for this spiritual aspect of the mother. All right, so the crone archetype, which I feel like is glamorized a lot, rightfully so. I mean, you're coming to the age where your menses are about to end. Your life is popping off. I would hope so, at least anyway. I really do hope so. You know, you become a recognizable person within your community. It's just an amazing time to be a woman. I cannot wait for that time. Me personally, and I feel like it is glamorized too, you know. I remember hearing jokes with my friends when we started having our periods. We'd be like, man, can't wait for it to end. You know, it's just glamorized, I feel. Anyways, even in movies and stuff too, you know, like the crone, the witchy woman down the street, living her life by herself with her ravishing garden. I don't know. Is it just me? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, so this is crone, typically is 40 plus. Could be before, could be later on. It all depends. And so biologically, like I mentioned, you know, you're phasing out of your menses. And so like again, like you did in the beginning of your menstrual cycle, you do need that support again towards the end, because again, your hormones, your mood swings, everything is just fluctuating up and down. And so shepherd's purse is an herbal ally, I would suggest. Vitex is another powerful one. You can use it, honestly, Vitex you can use at the beginning and at the end. It's both mutually beneficial. Like I mentioned earlier too, you know, you have that social recognition aspect. You know, your life is really, typically, depends, honestly, like I mentioned earlier, but you know, it's popping off. Your career is popping off. Your family life, honestly, could be popping off, or on the other spectrum, falling apart. It all depends on what's going on. But yeah, so honestly, this is a time of celebration, and I think of flowers, honestly. And it could, you know, flowers can be of assistance on both sides of the spectrum, whether your life is popping off or falling apart. It both has a purpose, you know, it both has a purpose. And so I think of jasmine. You know, jasmine flower is white, symbolizes ceremony, progression, advancement, and it's a very, like, I get like a queenly vibe from jasmine whenever I use it. And so yeah, I would suggest that for the herbal ally, for the social aspect. And then lastly, the spiritual aspect. And lastly, for the spiritual aspect of the crone archetype, I think of yarrow, only because, like I mentioned earlier, you know, with the mother archetype, you are going through the process of the Chiron healing, or at least being aware of it. And then, you know, once you're on the other side of that and mastering it, you can begin to teach others. That's the whole point of being the wounded warrior story, is to teach others how to heal. And so in the crone archetype, yarrow embodies that same, I believe it is a Chiron plant, if I'm not mistaken. It has that same story of the wounded healer, and it was actually used by Roman soldiers, and I'm pretty sure other soldiers who had access to yarrow within the Mediterranean and North Africa, actually, because I believe it does grow there, who had access to that plant would use that whenever they would get wounded. And so yeah, yarrow, utilizing that for your spiritual development and advancement in your crone archetype, I believe that's a beautiful matchup right there. I don't know if you noticed during this video, but I love how this discussion really mirrored the energetic flow of the body. You know, you could correlate this to chakras, but there's such an array of energetic points in the body that chakras, I feel like it just limits it. Anyways, that's another discussion for another day. But yeah, I just love how this conversation mirrors that flow within the body, and if we can be open to how we can further enhance that flow within the body, physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually, that's where the magic happens. That's where we're thriving. That's where we're doing great. Even when we don't feel like it, we're still thriving and doing great. So yeah, I hope the information relayed today helps. It's cleanup time now. The girls are here painting. But yeah, let me know in the comments any plants in particular that you're leaning towards, any plants that have helped you at different stages of your womanhood. And thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, peace to you. Bye for now.